Back in March of 2019, the Canon RP was released, and tons of new cameras have been released since then. And for the price as of right now, the Canon RP is the best entry-level full-frame camera you can buy for video right now, if you are wanting to buy a new full-frame camera instead of used. It is a no-brainer when it comes to photos that Canon cameras are top tier, especially the full-frame lineup. Even with the Canon R7 and R10 out, the RP still holds its own when it comes to video quality and photography, even though the other two cameras have some updated features. But if you want me to talk about why it is still a monster when it comes to photos, let me know down in the comments below. Today we're conducting a little test. We are testing out the dynamic range the best way that I know how, and that is setting up the camera, exposing the camera 1 and 2 stops over and then 1 and 2 stops under, and then seeing how much we can recover during the edit. Disclaimer, over and under exposing is subjective or is set on a scene by scene basis. What I mean by this is based on the objects in the scene, you will have to either add or reduce light in the scene in order to get your preferred in-camera exposure to produce the image you are trying to get. For example, I wear black in all of my videos all the time, which means depending on the camera's dynamic range, I will either have to add more light while keeping an eye out for the highlights, because those are the first things to go when adding light and increasing the exposure in camera by either increasing ISO or widening the aperture, or just adding more light. But if you want me to talk more about that, let me know in the comments below. Now I like a darker, moodier scene, so I don't mind crushed blacks. But with this test, what I want to see is how much information I can pull back from an underexposed scene and an overexposed scene and get it to where I think is pleasing to the eye. The first setting is me sitting in my living room, lighting myself with the natural light coming in through the window on an overcast day. Let's start with the underexposed. You can find the exposure settings on the bottom right side of the screen. Now let's get into these exposures. Now this is fairly underexposed. You can see everything outside the window, not so much inside though. Now let's see how much we can bring back. Now for one stop underexposed, this is how I like my final image to look, with a little saturation, and I think we're good. Now for 0 stops underexposed, this isn't bad either. I think it is right in the middle of the road where you can add and take away without worrying about destroying the shadows or overexposing the highlights. Now we're going into the overexposures. At this point, there isn't much to recover. When you get to 1 stop overexposed, everything is washed out, but here is 1 stop overexposed and here is 2 stops overexposed. Now let's move on to the second scene. I'm here in my living room with the windows behind me, and I'm using the Godox SL60W paired with the Godox CS85D light dome as my key and ambiance light. I have the Godox light set to 15600 Kelvin. To try and match the outside as much as possible, I'm also using auto white balance, as I feel most people would when wanting to just have a grab and go vlog camera. This is fairly underexposed, but if you're going for that moody look and want to get as much detail of what is going on outside, I think this is a workable image for me. Now let's go to 1 stop underexposed. This is much better. You can still see everything out the window. Nothing looks washed out. Now let's go move on to middle exposure. Okay, now here things are starting to wash out to white. You can still see outside the window, and it is more of a high key look with some definite hot spots on my face, but I think it's workable. Again, we will quickly go through the overexposed because I think this is as far as you would want to go when exposing this scene. But here is 1 stop overexposed, and here is 2 stops overexposed. Now I wanted to try another scene where I turned off the key light, but as you can see here, the background is already blown out and we are 2 stops underexposed, so I didn't go any further with this test. However, I did want to try 2 more setups. I wanted to throw in another scene where I grabbed a smaller light to see how it would look. This is all done without another layer of diffusion, which I would highly recommend when using these smaller lights because the lights can be harsh. So I wanted to keep in mind those of you who don't want a massive Godox light sitting in your room or living room, or just don't want to spend the money on it. So here is the Instro C2 Rgb Light. It is a smaller light similar to all those small lights out there. However, you can't control this one from your phone. All the control dials are on the side of the camera, and it comes with this layer of diffusion to make the light softer, although it helps a little bit. I would still throw up another layer of diffusion or bounce the light off of something. If you want to see more tests done with these lights, let me know in the comments below. So what I did learn from this test with the Canon RP is that it is a powerful camera when it is placed in the right lighting conditions. You can create a beautiful image with this camera. One, I guess, major drawback to me is that it doesn't have a log profile, which means that it is easy to clip the highlights and the shadows. The upside is that it is a full frame sensor camera, so it does capture a decent amount of information in the highlights and the shadows that you can bring back. But it doesn't have the log profile like the Fujifilm X-H1, which I think is a great contender to this camera, which you can find out more about right here. Thanks for joining. Stay awesome.